My name is Zamir, and I'm a general partner of Vibranium VC. We're a venture capital firm. We invest in early-stage SaaS companies now with AI, of course. We are a Bay Area fund. Besides that, I'm a strategic advisor of innovators.ai. It's a company that is building a platform to basically reimagine the due diligence process, because we've been struggling and it's very manual. And I have amazing panelists today here with me to speak about the challenges and opportunities creating startups outside of Silicon Valley. And we're going to start the discussion by me, doing a short introduction, and I'm going to ask you to warmly welcome each one of my speakers. So, first speaker I want to introduce, Hem Suri. Hem is with, I'm sorry, I scroll down right here. Hem is the founder and managing partner of Spark Growth Ventures, a mid-stage community-oriented tech venture capital firm with a Pan-American focus, leveraging his 2+ decades of experience across engineering, operations, business, and investing. Hem focuses on identifying and helping high-potential startups on the cusp of major scaling through his and Spark's global community combined value add. Let's give a round of applause to Hem. Welcome him. And next expert I'm going to introduce is Brad Greenwald. He's the manager director at Hilltop Venture Partners, where he focuses on investment in technology and innovation-driven companies. Brad has a strong track record of supporting startups in non-traditional tech hubs, leveraging his extensive network and experience to drive growth. He's passionate about fostering entrepreneurship and creative value through strategic investments. Let's welcome Brad as well. Give him a round of applause. Great. The next speaker today on the panel is Howard Koh. He's a partner at Morpheus Ventures, where he specializes in global investments, technology, and healthcare. With a background in venture capital and operational leadership, Howard's has a keen eye on identifying disruptive technologies and supporting their commercialization. He brings a wealth of knowledge in cross-border investment and scaling startups in diverse markets. Let's welcome Howard. All right. And one more great speaker today is Paul Ye. He's a founding partner of Conductive Ventures, focused on investments in non-traditional, capital-efficient founders. Before starting Conductive Ventures, Paul was a partner at Kleiner Perkins. He has extensive experience in venture investing and has been instrumental in scaling multiple startups beyond Silicon Valley. His deep understanding of market dynamics and hands-on approach has helped many companies achieve significant milestones. Let's welcome Paul. Excellent, excellent, very good. Now, as a person from Bay Area, from Silicon Valley, I'm going to be, one of those kind of moderators, kind of a devil's advocate. I'm going to be saying, we have that in Silicon Valley. We also have that. But I want to ask a general question to all of you, because you've been working with startups, in different geographies, different types, different sizes, etc. So to start off, can each of you briefly share your perspective on the biggest challenges and opportunities you observed when building ventures outside of Silicon Valley? And I'm going to start with Paul.
All right. Hey, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? All right, cool. So I actually think, I see a lot of hands that went up in San Diego. I don't know how many of you guys are founders, but doesn't fundraising really suck here? I'm going to be honest, because I was actually at a startup between 2009 and 2012 here in Gaslamp area, or in really south of that area where land was very, very cheap. Man, it was so hard to fundraise. We flew out, my team and I, we literally took day trips to Bay Area, drove to LA. It was just hard to get the VCs to come down to visit San Diego. So I, coming from before investing as an entrepreneur, even with that high, I understand the challenges of kind of fundraising. So, me on the other side of the fence. So what we understand is, it's very difficult for these kind of non-major markets outside of the Bay Area, outside of New York. LA, you can argue is now coming back up, but very, very challenging in fundraising. So having said that, the opportunity is you guys get to be heads down, execute, because there's no noise around you, right? The startups I was at back in the Bay Area, it's a comparison. Every single meeting you go to, every single firm you approach, you see who else is who else is pitching the same exact partners. There's competition all around. So it's actually kind of nice to be able to just heads down build.
All right, cool. Less competition, more time to build the product. How about you, Hem? Same question.
Yeah, I will actually give you the answer, but before I go there, Paul's a good friend and a classmate, so I will say, Paul, it was not the ecosystem, it was you. I'm just kidding. No, he's a good friend. In fact, as I was coming to San Diego, he was going out and I was bummed.
Maybe a little closer to the microphone.
Okay, so coming to the point itself, so the challenge is, of course, the fundraising part. It's also about credibility. Sometimes people just discount the quality of work you're doing, the quality of your team, etc. if you're not in one of the major hubs. Similarly, the overall ecosystem that comes as a support system is not that evolved in some of the smaller places. I can go on and on, but on the flip side, the positive, along the lines of what Paul was saying, you have a lower cost of operation that you can actually set up in smaller places, which can allow you to be more capital efficient, and therefore you can raise capital at a lower price point, which reduces the hurdle rate for investors to deploy, and you can probably generate better outcomes for everyone. The other thing I will say is, and I've lived in 21 cities, I've lived in some of the biggest cities and also some of the smaller cities across my life so far. I just integrate well with people from smaller towns and places. I think they are just humble people. They are more authentic and honest people. And that just as a VC resonates better for me. So that, for me personally, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a universal statement. It resonates better and it works better for me. So that I think is a positive.
Okay, how about you, Brad?
I'm gonna give, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm gonna give three good things about being outside the Valley. One is sort of vertical specialization. So there's some places you can be, and I have a lot of companies and live and work in Israel and in Denver, in particular in terms of outside the Valley. But for example, in Colorado, we're really, you may not know this, but we're like the #1 aerospace and aviation hub. And therefore, if you're in those industries, you're going to find VCs in Colorado that actually really understand and know that. You're probably actually better off raising money there than in a particular vertical. Two, these other places really want you there, and so you have most often access to government type of funds or help. As an example, in Israel, they've got non-dilutive government funds that you can get. They're literally just, they give you money, you can raise other money. Similarly, in Colorado, for particular verticals, they'll give a 25% tax credit, not a tax shield, but a tax credit to investors who put money into certain industries. So there's our $100,000 investment is going to, they're going to get $25,000 off their state taxes. It's going to cost them $75,000, so that's a benefit. My third, I totally forgot. I'm going to move on.
So I agree with all of them. Being last on this, for this question, takes a lot of the answer away. But I would like to echo kind of some what Brad was talking about, which is there are additional incentives, kind of quite a bit. Canada, Montreal, Toronto has great R&D incentives for hiring engineers. They literally hire 2x the engineer because they give you 40% tax credit for engineering talent and engineering salary you pay out. And also, I think the vertical specification is actually really important. San Diego has a huge defense hub, right? You guys have SoCal, you guys have a lot of the Navy and whatnot, all down here. And they are, especially now in the aerospace defense field, burgeoning field, that's something you can lean into. LA, there's logistics, A&D as well, obviously, a lot of defense primes are there, robotics, and whatnot. So it's about leaning in. When people talk about lower costs, absolutely is true. And you also reduce, I think one thing that may not have been said, I think specifically, is the echo chamber that sometimes the Silicon Valley does have is you sort of believe in your own Kool-Aid a little bit because it resonates just within that echo chamber, and sometimes it doesn't actually resonate outside of that. So they kind of fund into that. And you actually end up finding that companies outside Silicon Valley is much more focused on a functional utility value, right? They're delivering value to a customer, right? They're a lot more scrappy about it, a lot more cash efficient about it, and frankly can get to a much better outcome without relying on just equity financing. Frankly, you can probably get diluted less because you've been better about not raising 7 rounds of financing, right? You may get higher valuation in the Bay Area, but you may need like 7 and kind of. You guys have your mics on.
Oh, sorry. But but overall, the likelihood of success and likelihood of you controlling your own destiny because of the circumstances involved, because you don't have as easy of an access, although that's going away a little bit with Zoom, to be honest, right? For like first-time meetings, I think we're all taking it with Zoom. But at least that still, I think still resonates, I think, to a degree.
Well, thanks. Thanks for these comments. Well, COVID changed things, right? Before, when you had to come to Silicon Valley, and the investors there, they would be like, okay, you got to be, not more than 1 hour drive away, so I can come to your office, and then you can shake my hand, and we can go to lunch. Now, with Zoom and everything changed. Now we make deals without even seeing the founders. But still, Silicon Valley has this aura around it that you have to come, you have to be there. There's so many events. And there's a lot of resources, obviously, a lot of money. But I want to ask him the next question. So on one side, there are these ecosystems that can provide you resources. But if you look at the founders, if you look at the startups, do you see that there are some unique features to the founding teams, to the startups themselves, that come from non-traditional, non-Silicon Valley ecosystems?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started alluding to the human factor, the intangibles or the soft aspects of the founding team itself. By the way, for us, the team is probably the most important ingredient of the underwriting, and I think also the biggest determinant of the outcome itself. And when you look at it, there is expertise, there is hustle, there is a mission, but there is also how you integrate. Like the personality itself, if people are genuine or people are not genuine, etc. And I think that is more elevated in a positive way in smaller places or mid-tier cities and larger cities. I think just the pressure of being in a larger city and also being in a bubble brings out sometimes the wrong tendencies and people pursue wrong outcomes. So that's one thing. The other thing I will say is sometimes the problems are localized. And these are not problems that you can easily see if you're living in a bigger city like New York, for example. So a good case in point is when I was on Wall Street, the few hours I would have free in a month when we would go out, we would hardly see any families. We would hardly see any strollers. We would hardly see older people. So you would basically be looking at a very one-dimensional demographic. So if a founder is actually living there, breathing there, and observing, do you really think they will actually, first of all, realize there could be a problem which addresses the demographic of young families or older people? Or even if they think, do you really think they really appreciate the depth and the breadth of the problem? So I think some of the problems are just localized and they may or may not actually be solved for if you are in a bigger hub. And we have several companies in our portfolio which are good examples of that, but it can take a lot of time. So I will stop here and say those will be the two most critical aspects for me.
I want to address my next question to Brad. You guys are working across borders in different countries. What do you see are common misconceptions about building a startup outside of Silicon Valley?
I mean, my experience is really in Israel, and I guess what's tough in Israel, one, there is, I'm not only in Israel, which is a little bit sort of out there, but I partner with a guy in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem happens to be kind of the poor cousin of Tel Aviv, so it's kind of out there and out there. The two big things that you need to worry about there are, geopolitical issues, which obviously they're going through now. So that's sort of a risk factor that goes into it and makes it tough to get things funded. Hasn't been a big issue to date, the current situation notwithstanding. And then basically it's just a small market. So basically you can prove yourself in the market, but you can't expand there. So you do need to have that incremental risk of coming to the US or Europe, and that's a lot of what I do with these companies. That being said, there's all kinds of great things local in terms of very highly educated workforce, great entrepreneurial spirit, those kind of things. And as an investor, the valuations there are much lower because of capital. So one of the interesting things is it depends what side of the fence you're on, but outside of Silicon Valley, you are tending, especially in frothy times, to get better valuations. In other words, you as an entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneur, you might need to accept that. And two, as an investor, that's why money can flock outside of Silicon Valley for that reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of money around, different hubs and venture capital in the United States and outside. And I want to address my next question to Howard. So typically, when we look at startups in the valley, it's like, okay, grow, 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 fast, fast, fast. This is the most important metric. No worries about revenues or even especially profits. Just grow the valuation. Now, when you try to assess other companies, other startups in different places, non-traditional hubs, what are the things that you're looking for? What are the things that you're looking at assessing these startups and considering them for investment?
Look, whether it's in Silicon Valley or not, I think you fundamentally still have to look at the fundamentals of the business. Do they have a good business model that actually works? Does the unit economics actually work? Are they providing something that people need and want and not just a nice to have? I think that sort of pervades through. I think one of the things that you do have to think about is, as they grow, is there enough talent pool in that region, in that area to support that growth, right? And that's something that you have to really double click on. Especially, at our stage, we're typically Series A investors, A and B investors. That inflection point in terms of growth profile, you do have to consider much more so, because oftentimes they're expanding from 7, 10, 15, 20 people to 100 people at that period of time. And can you get the top level talent that you need to be able to really compete kind of globally, not just in their local markets, not even just the US, but globally. So that's something that we really have to look at beyond just the basic business fundamentals.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of times when I work with international founders, especially from smaller countries, not from Israel, because Israeli ecosystem is very tightly connected to the US, but from countries like, I don't know, Kazakhstan or others, it seems like founders are really thinking local. It's from one side is good, they identify the local problem, they work with it, but they don't typically have the global vision. And I want to address my question to Paul here. When you work with founders from different hubs, from different countries or from different hubs in the United States, do you see any kind of trends? What trends are you seeing? What would you like to identify today to the audience?
So very similar to what you mentioned earlier with kind of the international scope. Even within US, there's so many different ecosystems, right? What I actually see across, and this is really interesting, we actually started preaching at Conductive Ventures capital efficiency when we started the firm back in 2017. Coming from a large firm like a Kleiner Perkins, that was never the issue. We always were saying, like you said, hey, everything has to be a home run. Everything has to be such a big outcome. Grow, grow, grow at all costs. Now, coming across the different ecosystems like San Diego, like the Midwest, like certain parts of East Coast, minus New York, there are a lot of capital efficiency founders, and this is all predicated on the fact that it was not easy for them to access capital. I've seen so many times there are some the prototypical Sand Hill Row entrepreneurs who are Stanford PhDs, or Harvard dropouts, and partner with a Berkeley or MIT co-founder. They walk across the street with the PowerPoint deck to Sand Hill Row, and then bam, after a week they come out with $10 million of fundraised, seed or Series A raised, right? That's a very prototypical Sand Hill Row traditional kind of investment. At Conductive, and this is all what we realized is that a lot of the cities, like when I was trying to raise money from San Diego, it was just so hard to get the access. So without the access, I was forced to be scrappy. So it's almost like without very easily, ability to raise money, I had to make my dollar stretch. I had to make sure every single thing I spent on the A/B test the hell out of it, right? I can't just say, oh, you know what, I have enough money to do 10 different tests, so let's run all 10 at the same time. So the scrappiness and the capital efficiency is something that I really see across kind of the non-traditional markets, and we love that.
Well, it seems like for the past couple of years, even startups in Silicon Valley started, paying attention to saving the dollar because they had to stretch fundraising.
Because they no longer have to access the capital, right?
Absolutely.
No longer have the easy zero interest rate environment where they can access the money easily.
Yeah, the VC winter, right? So let me ask Paul the next question. So besides startups and VCs, there are some other players that significantly change the landscape, especially when it comes to accelerators and incubators. And of course, we know a bunch of the global programs like Y Combinator, 500 startups, plug and play, and so what, everybody in Silicon Valley. But outside of Silicon Valley, there's many accelerators and incubators that help. And I wanted to ask Paul, to tell us a little more whether you see that as a good tool, whether they do have an effect on the ecosystems out there, and maybe highlights a couple particular programs that you believe had an influence.
Very good question. I think that, yes, they are helping. I won't name any just because I don't want to get in trouble with the other ones I know I did not name. But I'll tell you what's interesting is, post-COVID, a lot of people now move back to where they grew up, where they're from, where it's affordable living, right? Where they can actually have a family, raise a family, and without worrying about crime or anything on the streets in the middle of San Francisco. So I have met a lot of awesome folks that either locally or went back to where they were from, and established these amazing accelerators, incubators, home-based, that are now able to identify some of these startups. So again, post-COVID world, it's actually really democratized the access to both local startups and the opposite side of access to funding.
Yeah, Brad, let me ask you the same question about the accelerators. What do you see out there? Are there any programs that you believe are really benefiting the startups, helping them, to solve the issues in the early start?
Yeah, I'll mention TechStars. I'm a little biased. Was involved with the very first one, which happened in Boulder, Colorado, with David Cohen leading it primarily, who's on my advisory board, full disclosure, and he actually just took over CEO of TechStars now. TechStars, you may know, is kind of outside of Silicon Valley, probably one of the biggest, well-known ones. It's got about 50 or 60 accelerators around the world. It's done very well. But they had traditionally focused on, non-traditional hubs in Pittsburgh and Houston and places like that. Some are industry focused, some are city focused. Wonderful, wonderful things to do if you're in the right situation, the right time. I mean, just like anything, they're good and bad accelerators, right? I mean, if you look at it generally, if you go to the top third of them, you're gonna do great, it's gonna be worth it. Honestly, there's a lot of them that you go through the process, you use a lot of your time, 3 months, 6 months, whatever they're gonna be, and they're gonna take a slice of your equity for not a lot of money. So just think it through, be careful, make sure you talk to people who've gone through these before to make sure they actually got out of it, either from a learning standpoint or access to capital, what they thought they would. But in general, for the right company, I think it's phenomenal. Now, I'm gonna name one name, because we're talking about, YC is very connected to the whole craziness and froth of San Francisco and the Valley. In general, I tend to stay away from YC companies. I'm just being honest. It's not because they aren't as good at companies, they often are, but they get all gussied up, they get all frothed up, and they're told they're fantastic, and they're told, you're a startup, you should get 20 million valuation, and you go outside, and there's a much more realistic sense of who they are and what they are in terms of risk profile.
Very interesting. Now, everybody knows that Silicon Valley is a place where a lot of people from many parts of the world, they come there. And there's so many cultures and such a big diversity. But at some points, I start seeing that cultures might affect, in both ways. It might be a benefit, depending on what kind of culture you come from, or it might be your, bottleneck, not allowing you to, network as fast and to build these relationships that you need. So I wanted to ask Howard here, from your experience, these, cultural differences, how do they impact the growth and development of startups? Like, do you see any traits in the cultures that help startup founders to be successful, and maybe others that are preventing them to do that?
I don't know about if there's fundamental cultural differences, especially among entrepreneurs and kind of guys who are actually doing startups. I think entrepreneurs tend to be scrappy, right? And I do think maybe there's a difference more from first-generation immigrants and whatnot versus guys who's been here for a long, long time. First-generation immigrants, for example, tends to have a little bit tougher time because they're new to the industry, new to the ecosystem, and they're hustling. They just hustle more, right? And that's, frankly, I think that goes back to the history of the United States in terms of first-generation immigrants. Your parents, whatnot, they're hustling, they're opening up laundry shops, they're doing whatever it needs to get done just to make a business happen, right, in the brave new world. So I think it's more a bit that I think everybody comes to the US, I think, with the ideal of doing better kind of for themselves and their children. And I think that is kind of the overriding piece. People aren't coming here just to come here for the sake of coming here. So I think a lot of it is that that first generation aspect actually probably just pervades that need and want and that hustle to do more with the time that they have. than maybe guys who've been here for fourth, fifth, and sixth generation. I think it's a little bit more of that. If you wanted to kind of talk about like cultural kind of differences between countries that people come here with.
Doesn't Vibranium focus a lot on that?
Yeah. I was going to say is that we work with a lot of immigrant founders. One of the aspects that we really like is the hustling part, because people coming from different countries here, they don't really look back as an option to say, okay, I failed, I'm going to go back, and in a lot of cultures that would be perceived as oh no, why did you come back? Go to the United States again, and very hardworking. And we see that a lot of times they have good technical engineering, talent. They can build product. But one thing I saw that some of these teams were lacking is building a business around the product. That's why when I look at accelerators on all these programs, I think they're really good to help them basically figure out how to do their go-to-market strategy, build their sales process, do the fundraising properly the way it's exceptional here in the United States. Let me ask him the next question. So we talk, we see a lot of unicorn startups here in the United States. But there are quite few unicorns out there, successful startups in the world. So I wanted to ask you, from the companies that you've supported, maybe you've invested or you mentored, can you give one good example of a startup that made it? What was the factor of their success?
Yeah, I think it is going to become a little bit repetitive, bringing out the elements that we have observed through our lived experience that I have already kind of hinted at. One is just the mindset itself and the demeanor itself, but the second one is just understanding the local ecosystem and being more integrated with the local ecosystem, which kind of builds on to what Brad and Howard were also saying regarding what are the support systems from the government, what are the industry setups, etc. A case in point would be a company we invested out of Columbus, Ohio, which is doing remote condition monitoring for highly valued industrial assets. So Ohio State University was doing cutting edge work in wireless charging. So these guys tried to take the IP, commercialize it, and they were in Ohio and the Midwest. Generally, if you have to look at one area outside of Southeast US right now, that's where traditional manufacturing was. So these guys were going around the facilities and trying to actually see if they can do wireless charging for sensors, etc. But that led them to, through the just lived experience, understand that machines are failing. And they said, okay, let's pivot and go and do remote condition monitoring. Now, that idea was great, but in order to be able to be successful, you have to have connections. So they knew, because of the mindset they had, but also the connections they had with the blue-collar folks, if you may, the plant managers, the operations managers, the maintenance managers. They said, let's start doing micro experiments. Let's try doing pilots, etc. That gave them momentum, case studies, and now over the course of the last several years, hundreds and thousands of facilities across all of North America, in Europe, in Japan, etc. But the idea is it all started because they had the hustle and the mindset of being in a blue-collar environment. They had the connections, they had the support of the local government in Columbus and also Ohio, and the university, and that enabled them to be successful. So localized, but now they are global, leveraging the local experiences.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Because we only have a few minutes left, I'll stop my questions because I really want this to be a little interactive. So let's open this to the floor. If you have a question to our dear panelists, please raise your hand. It'll be very interesting to hear what you got to say. Yes.
Well, gentlemen, great session. Top 2 attributes you look at from each one of you in the companies or the startups you're investing in. Just
top 2 attributes that you look for in the companies that you're investing for each one of the panelists.
So team, obviously super important. We want to see their proven scrappiness, the whole bit that everyone talked about. But a lot of it is the mindset, right? Like, are they thinking, hey, I just want to build this as a lifestyle business? Great. You're not, nothing wrong with that, but not quite venture ready or venture backed. Second thing is we love the capital efficiency piece. How much money have you burned to how much money you're making? Very simple, not rocket science, but business fundamentals.
I think the people part is absolutely a given, and I've said it now ad nauseum, but the second part for me would be, is this a real problem looking for a solution, or is this actually a solution looking for a problem? And that's what we focus on a lot as well. But there are a bunch of things, top 2 would be those 2.
in addition to the personality, the grit of the team is the sort of functional ability of the founding team. So you really want to see, and I stole this from some other VC, but you want to see three personas: a hacker, a hustler, and a hipster. A hipster being kind of the UI, UX design thing if you're doing software. And then I would just sort of say, as my friend over here said, unit economics. Entrepreneurs love to wave their arms and go, oh, we can sell this for $300 and do this. And at the end of the day, you have to sort of piece it out and make sure that every unit you sell, when you add up all the costs and all the revenues and figure it all out, you're making some good money.
So I just double click on the founder and team piece. I tend to like to look at founder company market fit in separate from product market fit. Is why you, why now, and like why your team, why now. And that piece of it. And the second piece is market opportunity. It's got to be scalable. For a fund of our size, the outcome has, I can't even look at a market opportunity that's less than $3 billion, right? So is there an opportunity to be at scale, right? So those two pieces are what I focus on.
So to summarize what my colleagues were saying, and I'll add something from our standpoint as Vibranium, the market size got to be great big, beyond maybe $5 billion. The team has to be, professionals in that field. Past experience is great. Really, when you look at the team, you got to be believing that they can pull this off. One aspect that we also look at is the tech side of things. We conduct technical due diligence. We want to make sure that they're building a unique product. That something that they're doing is not just a package for a ChatGPT, which is great. It might solve a real problem, but there's not much IP behind it. So we want to make sure, and because we see so many startups, we do these demo days, pitches, and anytime I look at it and I'm like, well, I've seen it already 20 times. It's not very exciting. Or if I look at it and say, wow, this is the very first time I see somebody trying to do it this way. This is a unique business model, a unique technology. Then it's getting excited. So basically, I am as an investor, I have to get excited by listening to the pitch, and looking at what the startups are doing, so they would go into the next stage. Now, with that said, unfortunately, we ran out of time, and we want to make sure that the event moves on, and I'm sure that our speakers will stick around. I wanted just to wrap up. Even though being from Silicon Valley myself, I always say, come to the Bay, come and see all these amazing startups. I know for sure that there are other places in the United States and outside the United States where there's so much opportunity. So for the founders in the audience that we see today, what I'm going to say is, try to identify the best fitting ecosystem for your vertical, where you will find a good talent in that ecosystem, where you will find the right investors and right potential strategic, acquisitions right there next to you. So you build those relationships, and maybe you don't even have to come to see us in Silicon Valley, but you don't have to move your company there to be successful and create a unicorn. With that said, I want to thank our esteemed speakers. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys, we will have Zamir actually move down here. That's what's going to happen.
Maybe. It's a great weather. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you around. By the way, we're doing a Shark Tank very soon on the main stage. I'll be one of the judges. There's going to be 7 amazing startups we look at, so come by and check us out. Thank you, guys. Thank you.